So the forthcoming petition is PE 1458 by Peter Chirby on the Register of Interest for members of Scotland's Judiciary. Members have a note by the Clerk, as paper 4 refers. I'll also point out that we've got the Clerk's note of the meeting between the Lord President, myself and Chick Brodie, and the various submissions. The couple of points I'd just like to raise before we start the debate about this is that the petitioner suggests that we call on the Scottish Court Service to give evidence on the Scottish Court Service Staff Register of Interests, which obviously currently exists. Secondly, I think there was a very interesting additional paper, I refer to your additional papers from Moy Ali, the Judicial Complaints Reviewer, when she summarised the issue, I think, is she felt the real issue here was the failure to recuse, not about a dearth of recusal data. So I think there is she makes a very powerful point. I think her letter is very direct and very straightforward and doesn't pull any punches at all about where this particular issue is. And I think also the committee may wish to write again to Lord Gill to suggest that he considers a record of declarations of interests similar to that for the several members of the Judiciary in the SCS annual report could be set up for other judges and sheriffs. Members will know that there's only a handful involved in the board relative to the much greater number of sheriffs and judges who are not members of that particular board. So in other words, they are not required to have a declaration of interest at present. So that's probably I think some key points for the committee. Can I throw open, Chip Brodie?
Yes. Can I? Firstly, I think I missed something in all this earlier on, and in fact, it would have gone on before I joined the committee. I mean, the petition called for a register of pecuniary interests of judges. I don't know where the recusal bit came in, but certainly in terms of the financial interests and the conversations that we had with Lord Gill, and looking again at my notes, the view was that I think the request was made that the financial interests that are available via the SCS to 3 members of the SCS board. In fact, it turns out there are 7 judicial members of the SCS board. I still think it might be worthwhile trying to keep the 2 issues separate in terms of, I know it's difficult, but keeping the financial interests as opposed to declaration of any potential conflict of interest. We might return to that at some stage in the future, but I do think that we might want to expand upon the information that's already available via the SCS in terms of financial interests of the judiciary.
I think the key point, if I understand the judicial reviewers' issues, is that it's being able to recuse before a case is the crucial issue. So, for example, if a judge was dealing with a case where he or she had some financial interest in the case, in that stage the judge would recuse him or herself. So there's still is ability to recuse over a financial issue, and that's, I think, the point that Mo Ali is making. Jackson Carl and then John Wilson.
I would only say, Convener, and I find no fault in any of the way we've conducted ourselves throughout this issue at all. I've read the letter from Moy Ali again with a great deal of interest, and I certainly would, if it were possible to divide the time up appropriately, suggest that this might yet be a subject that we should take to the Chamber as part of any Petitions Committee debate, because I think it would be useful to go beyond the bounds of this committee to allow some of these issues to be stated more widely in the Chamber, and for the Cabinet Secretary to have to respond formally to some of the issues that have arisen. Because I do feel that although we've moved matters forward in a limited way by nature of the discussions we've had, that I don't think any of us are wholly satisfied with the outcome, frankly, or totally persuaded by the case that has been made to us.
Well, I think that's a very useful point Jackson Carroll makes. Just to inform the committee, at the conveners group we put a bid in for organ donation, and that date, basically that's been agreed, albeit we're just fine-tuning whether that was going to be April or more likely May. But this, any further bids, if the committee were so agreeable, would just join the queue at the conveners group. There's always healthy interest for plenaries, but I think plenaries are a very useful opportunity. In my view, is that this would be a very good subject to have. It may be that it's actually after the recess, but nevertheless, whenever there is a slot, you can be assured that I would be arguing for that at the conveners group.
So, I think that it would be a useful subject for us to actually take, because I think we've kind of probably got as far as we're likely to get as matters stand. But I don't think we've, or as I said a moment ago, been entirely satisfied with the outcome at which we've arrived, and I think it would be useful for us to sort of make that clear and to allow the issue to have a wider profile.
Thank you. Sir Brody?
Yeah, in general, I agree with Jackson. I don't think there was any intended obfuscation when we met the Lord President, but the conflation of pecuniary interests with family relationships, recusals on that basis as to you don't know who's going to come up, who they know, etc. And if we can divide these, I still think that there might be a requirement to at least, as I say, focus on the, given I agree with Jackson, that we focus on the half commitment that we have in terms of information that's available through the SCS board to look at the pecuniary interests and then look at how we might deal with other complaints.
Thank you for that. Other members? Are members agreeable with that course of action? John Wilson?
Thank you, Convener. I think this discussion today has been useful, but in terms of some of the responses, and I think one or two members have made reference to Moy Ali's timely response to the committee in relation to the issues raised about the published information on recusals. The difficulty is that when you go back to the Lord President's letter in the second paragraph, it says basically, pleased to say my officials have devised a means by which this can be achieved, and that's the where judge or sheriff formally recuses him or herself from hearing a case. The court clerks will inform the Judicial Office for Scotland when a judge or sheriff has to recuse. Now, the difficulty with this is that it's still, as far as I understand, down to whether or not a judge or a sheriff decides to recuse themselves. And without a register of interest, then how would anyone dealing with the courts understand or realise when a judge should have to recuse themselves? Because a judge or a sheriff could continue to hear a case, and without any evidence or without a register of interest to actually say otherwise, then judges and sheriffs can continue to hear whichever case they want to hear and recuse themselves when they decide to recuse themselves. And clearly the petition that's been raised has one which has clearly indicated that where there are financial interests that a judge or a sheriff may have in relation to shareholdings in a particular company or a company directorship that they may hold, where they are actually hearing a case that may be directly relevant or prevalent in their interests. And unless there is a register which clearly shows the financial interests that that sheriff or their family may have in that business, then clearly it's very difficult for an ordinary member of the public to understand the relationship that a judge or a sheriff may have. I think most importantly, Convener, is what the petition has raised, is that the Lord Gill talks about the confidence in the judiciary. What we're here to do, hopefully, as a committee of this Parliament, is to look at the confidence of the public has in the judicial system that currently operates in Scotland. And I think that should underlie our investigations into this issue. And I do welcome Jackson Carlo's suggestion that we do try and get a debate in the Chamber on this issue. But I think there are still issues that we need to examine further in relation to this petition, and particularly in light of the responses we've had to date, that we clearly get some assurances that we can actually move forward, not only from Lord Gill, but also from the Scottish Government in relation to what we expect of the judiciary in Scotland and how accountable that judiciary is in the public's eyes, not in the eyes of a self-serving group of judicial appointees.
John Wilson, with his comments, I think it's right to go back to the fundamentals, which is what is the petition calling on, and certainly the registrar of pecuniary interest was absolutely key. So it sounds like the committee are enthusiastic about having a bid for a plenary session in Parliament, and if that is agreed by all members, we'll make appropriate urgent requests to get that in the queue for future meetings. I think there was also the note to our members agreeable. We also like to Lord Gill in the terms of the points that I made earlier as well, to clarify the issue about whether he considers a record of pecuniary declaration of interest similar to that for several members of the Judiciary.
Yep.
Is that agreeable? Any other points we need to cover? Are members happy with that? John Wilson?
Could I suggest we write to the Scottish Government to ask them their views on the exchanges that have taken place between the committee and those who have provided evidence to the committee, and ask them whether or not the government, based on the information we now have, would consider reviewing their earlier decision not to engage in this process.
That's a good point. Were members agreeable? John Wilson's point? Thank you for that.